Okay, so I am now back with part two, and I am going to do my very best to keep the quick demonstrations of how the different blending tools use or how you can use them um, as I can, but I do apologize if I get distracted. That is something that happens very, very frequently, so I will do my best to rein it in if I feel like I'm starting to veer off the path. So, all right. So the first thing I'm going to start with are the two sides of, or two sizes, I should say, of these blending brushes. So again, because as I stated in the previous video, these tend to be uncomfortable in my hand, I figured I would use them first. So, and if you're curious about the panels I'm using for the blending demonstration, I just grabbed one of these packs. It's Tim Holtz watercolor cardstock. It's perfectly fine to use the inks on the watercolor paper, no big deal. And it'll be actually even better because for the parts where I come in and I show you how to do smushing and all that where it involves water, then I'm using the right medium already from the get-go. But you don't have to use water if you're using inks on the watercolor cardstock. So Tim's stack was already pre-cut down, so I just went with it, and I can use both sides. So if somehow I should get through that whole stack. Okay, all right, first segue done. We're good. So for these, I'm just gonna go ahead and take the lids off, and again, Peacock Feathers, Uncharted Mariner, and both of these are in the oxides. The blending is going to be the same whether you're using the Distress inks or the Distress oxides, so I really don't think it's necessary to go grab one of the few oxide or Distress inks that I have. The blending will be the same, just reiterating the point that you do not want to use the same blender for both inks. So, and it's not because of a color, it's just because, again, these are formulated, the inks and the Distress oxides are formulated differently. So you do not want to use the same blending tool if you are combining two colors. So, alright, that being said, let me start out with the big one. And I apologize if it's a little awkward. I have not used this in a while, but like I said, because a lot of people like these and they're out there, it would not be right if I didn't show you since I happen to have a couple. So I'll use the big one first, and I'm just going to go into the Peacock Feathers. And I think the vast majority of when you are using any of the inks, doesn't matter what kind, the standard rule that I have seen everywhere is you always want to kind of start blending off the edge and work your way in, just because you'll get a better blend and you won't get like blobby sections of color where it was too concentrated because you came right onto the paper, if that makes sense. So coming into the side, and you can see it comes through and it does it nice and smooth, but it's the holding it for a long time like this is what bothers my hands. And I don't know if that's because the job I have as a lunch lady is very, very physical. I'm constantly lifting heavy stuff, moving it around, and stuff like this can aggravate the strain that gets put on my hands every day. I'm not complaining, about my job or anything like that, but that's the physical reality that I have to work within, given what I do when I'm not crafting. So anyway, so you can see it's nice. It gives a nice fluffy coating of the ink on there, and it's pretty smooth. So for short things, sure, this could be fine. But again, test it out. Make sure this is something that's comfortable with your hand. And I'm going to come in, and I'll just for the purposes, I'll come in with the other blender, with the other color, and then I'll lift this up and show you how does it look. So, so I'm coming now in with the Uncharted Mariner. So because it's a smaller brush, again, you'll have to pick up more ink. But it's doing the blending. Oh, I cannot talk today. The bristles will poke through the openings in the stencil to get the color laid down on your paper or your substrate, whatever it is that you're using. So just even circles is in all of the demonstrations that I've seen, unless you're doing something specific where you want to make polka dots or something, then you could just mush it down to get the circular look off of the ink daubers. So that's what it looks like. You know, it does a really good job. It's nice. The color is blended smoothly. I don't have any smudgy parts where it's blotchy or uneven or anything like that. So that is using the blending brushes. So this size would be good for smaller areas like I did here with the Uncharted Mariner, and this will fill in larger areas where I used the peacock feathers. So I am going to flip my paper over and get it ready for the next demonstration. Okay, so blending brushes. And because I have a big enough area, it's easy enough. The stencil overlaps the paper, so I don't have to worry too much about getting my fingerprints, excuse me, air bubble, getting my fingerprints on the paper that I'm working with and smudging the ink or, you know, doing whatever fruity things that are the oils on our fingerprints can do to our stuff. So let me move these. I feel like I'm closed in here. Okay, and the next one I want to use, since these are similar to, like if you took these two, probably it could be similar, but these are more in line with the brushes. So I'll use these little guys next. And again, these are for filling in smaller detailing if you're doing the ink blending. I would not attempt to do an entire page with something of this size, because I think at that point, if you try to do something small on a full sheet, even like this size, your hand would be cramped no matter what you use. So just something to keep in mind. These are for like detailing. So this one I'm going to kick off with the Uncharted Mariner. And again, it's recommended that I've seen, because you can see here it got a little dark. I'll see if I can smooth that out and blend it out. But you want to come in with a nice light circular motion to make sure you get a good blend. And I seem to be getting rid of a lot of that concentrated bit of color that came down because I didn't quite start easy. I just sort of plopped my hand down. Not good for demonstrations. So that's with the bigger brush, and you can go in a bigger area. Again, not as long as you're not trying to do this whole thing with it. You could really fatigue your hand that way. So it did good. It did very respectable, and it blended out that concentrated section that came down in this part of the half circle. So it looks nice. It definitely does the job. And you can always just rub it off if you want to get the excess off. Same thing with these. You can always come in and rub off the excess inks if there's any on there, so it's quote-unquote ready to go next time. So that's with the largest of the detailing brushes. And let me reset that. And I don't exactly have to line it up, but I will, just because why not? Okay, so the next one I'm going to come in, I think there's even a smaller one here. Maybe I have that one. Yeah, this one is a smaller angled brush. Yeah, let me double check. I thought there was one a little bit tinier. Okay, I think I had two that were the same size. So, big one, medium with the angled tip, and then the smallest one with a flatter tip. Those are the 3 sizes that actually come with it. I think I got 2 that were the same size. So let me move these away so we don't get confused, as well as this guy since I've already used it. Okay, so then I'm going to go to the medium size, and this time I'm going to come in with the peacock feathers and show you what I mean about being able to get down in the detail. So here I'm going to work on keeping the color in just this bubble or this circle. And again, I was a little splotchy, but if you just take a little minute to blend it out, then you can get rid of most, if not all, of that splotchy look in the section that you're trying to color. And in the editing, I know it seems like far away, but in the editing, I will make sure that this is zoomed out for you so you can see better in the close-up detail of what exactly I'm doing. So this is the medium, and it filled in. I don't have any color coming out in the other areas, so again, this is really good for the detailing. And to round it out, I'm going to dip back into the Uncharted Mariner with the smallest size to give the demonstration with that. So I'm going to take off some of the excess, which you can always do on the side. You can come right in, or if you want to make sure you're not going to get a big blob of color, you can always kind of take off the excess. Because these little brushes, I mean the brushes and the foam pads, they hold a lot of ink. So now I'm going to use this little teeny bubble right here next to my finger and show just how precise these little things can get. And again, just keeping it light, you don't have to mash it in there. And again, if it's a little splotchy for your taste, then just take a little extra minute to do some additional blending. So here you see, using the big one, you can get away with using it in a little bit bigger area, or I could have kept it concentrated in the larger circles. This was the medium with the angled in the circle, and then the fine detailing one, the smaller one, in that small circle. And then just for grins and giggles, I'll line up. I don't really have to go on the whole thing there. I'm going to come in and just do the little one, because that is a very, very tiny circle, and I am not getting any ink in any of the other circles. So you have that circle right there. So it just went right where I wanted to put it. So that is the demonstration with all the brush type blending tools that I have in my craft room. Okay, so I'm going to move those completely away so I don't forget myself and reach out and grab it, because, yeah, that happens. So now what I want to do is I'm going to leave the stencil aside right now, and I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to use the large rectangle with the flat foam and show you how that works. So I'm going to come in with the Uncharted Mariner first. And some tools pick up the ink a little faster, so you just kind of, you'll get the feel for it as you go through. So this one is nice, it does blend, but you can see, you can kind of get little stripes in there from the edge of the foam tool, so this would require like a lot more blending time to get it out. But once you get up and running, it does really good if you, again, take that minute to rub out any of the lines that popped up coming from the edge of the foam. So that definitely did the job. And again, it's got the Velcro on it. You don't have to have one of these handles for everything. You can just have one foam for every color, or you can have one for the color family. But of course, if you use one color, like if I use this for the blue families and the oxides, then you can't go back really and put it on the light. So I personally recommending getting one for each color, and then you only need the one handle to attach them to. You can just change them in and out. If you can't get your hands dirty, or you don't want to get your hands dirty, because again, everybody is particular, there's no right or wrong here, then you can use gloves to put them on and off. You know, there's a whole lot of ways that you can work it. I don't mind, so I don't bother with the gloves, particularly since this is water-based. But again, do what's comfortable for you. If you want to be sure that you're not going to accidentally contaminate something later, then feel free to put some gloves on when you're taking these on and off. So here we have that. That's the square one, or the rectangle one. Now I want to come in, I'm going to use the peacock feathers, and I'm going to introduce the flat one. So I'm just going to attach that here and get the ink going. Okay, so square, round, flat. So coming in, it's nice, and again, these in particular, I think you definitely want to be sure, the flat ones, whichever style, square or round, you definitely want to come in from the side, because these are more prone to putting bubbles down on your paper. If you come in, here I'll do it on purpose, if you come in like this and try to do the blending, this section is going to be a lot harder to blend out. So that's the point of why it's good to come in from the side and gradually work your way across the area, because this is going to be very difficult to get out later. So I did that on purpose, and you might be able to get rid of a good bit of it, but it is very hard to get rid of it. Like, there's that little smudge right here. You got that. This is a little bit darker. At least thankfully it looks blended, but hopefully it's showing you what I mean of putting all the things in practice, and why. If you want your thing to have like circly images in there, then by all means, you know, go ahead. If you don't mind giving it like a bubble effect, you can totally do that if that's a look you're going for, and you can do it on purpose. But if you're looking for a smoother blend here, and I know I could be covering it, but I'm not worried about, you know, my fingers getting into it, because this is just for demonstration. But if this was making a card for somebody, then I would come in, and then I could hold the paper in place and not have to worry about it sliding all over. Or not getting my fingers in it, as well as keeping it from sliding all over. So that's things that you can run into using the flat the flat round or the flat square, but they are usable. So, you know, again, you just will have to have more caution with using the flat surfaces for blending tools. Okay, so that is the flat blending tool, or foams, the flat blending foams. Yeah, and see here it popped up, no sweat. It's not going to come up unless you really crank on it. So just kind of get your finger under there to hold the edge down so you can peel off the foam. Okay, so now this is the dome for peacock feathers. And I don't have any more left. I didn't realize I had used up all my clean domed ones, so I made sure I found the one that goes to the peacock feathers, and then I can demonstrate the Uncharted Mariner with the finger dauber. Okay, so now we're coming in with the domed blending foam. So again, I'm going to come in from the side, and for me, I typically hold it like this. A lot of times I switch over to it, I don't even realize it, so I happen to be paying attention to what I'm doing, so I figured I'd mention it. This is what's most comfortable for me, how to hold it, especially if I'm doing a lot of blending. It just is so much more comfortable on my hand to hold it, but again, you will find what is comfortable for you. So that is the domed one. And while you can get the circle thing, of course, if you come in too hard, you'll get that. And again, it's really difficult to blend it out. But if you come in, and as long as I guess you don't really press too hard, then you should be okay. You shouldn't get as much of a I'm sorry, concentration of color in your blending. If you come in with a lighter hand, it's easier to get it out, if that makes sense. So again, if my words are not matching, I'm trying to show you so you can see what I mean, even if my words are like, what did she say? So anyway, okay. So that is the domed. For me, I think it blends a lot smoother. It's a lot easier to come in and mix. And what I'll do is I'll add a little more on here and blend some of the colors together to see how you can really get a nice blend and integrate the colors that you're putting down on your paper. So you can see the change in the color, and then you get that blending in there, but there's not like an abrupt line, which is really, really nice. So for me, as a recommendation, I would definitely recommend the domed blenders above all of them for big areas. And then because these are already domed, it's not an issue. These are good for smoother blending in smaller areas, if that makes sense. Or if you're doing edging, is really good. And I'll get to that in just a minute. So here you can see this was the square blender. It did fine, but you have to be careful that you don't get streaks or the stripes in there from the edge of the blending pad. Then the round one and is flat, you have to be more careful because it's more prone to give you these circles than the domed brush. But again, of course, any of them will be too much if you press too hard or what have you. So hard and fast rule when you're using a blending tool, come in from the side and work your way in, and that minimizes or eliminates the splodging that you get. And that was the domed thing. This was my pink. So here you can see I'm going to need a new one because this is just about shredded. So when I use it on stuff, these little, you can see, what do they call that? It's like a sweater. Is it pilling? I think it's called. It's like that. You get little bits pop up and then they break off. So this is when your dome blender or whatever your blending tool is, if it's the foam one, starts looking like this, then it's time to get a new one. So you can see what one looks like when it's well used. I almost threw it out, but I'm glad I didn't, so I could show you what I mean of when it starts getting old. So, so that was just for the demonstration. So now what I'm going to do is take the finger dauber and do some blending, and then I'll show you how nice it is for doing the edging. If you want to, when you do the edging on the sides of the paper, it's a very subtle way to give your project some dimension without actually having layers, which is really helpful, especially for card makers. You can add that extra detail to give more, or the appearance of more volume to your card and layers and all that fun effect without actually doing it, particularly if it's a card that needs to be mailed. Flatter, of course, is always better for mailing. This is a way to add interest and detail without adding on physical elements to the thing and then making it perhaps more difficult to mail. So, alright, so this is a finger dauber, and I want to come in then and I want to add some more Uncharted Mariner down here. Again, same rule applies. You want to come in and start the circular motion and work your way onto the paper with that circular motion. And it may reduce some of that splodging that's right there just because I'm adding an additional ink over it, And it's also had a little bit of time to kind of dry out while I've been chatting about the different things that you can do and what happens and so on. So again, it's really nice and smooth. If you were to use the whole sheet with the finger dauber, again, you could do it. However, you're going to fatigue your hand a lot faster. So again, this is better for smaller areas and for edging and things where you're not going to be doing this big whole section. But you know, I've learned that the hard way, because a lot of times I just grab something and I'm using the daubers and then I go, and then, you know, my hand is like exhausted and angry with me. So that's how I figured that one out, primarily. So, okay. So I added in some more color and it faded out some of that splodge right there. So now what I want to do is go in and edge the entire thing and fill in with the Uncharted Mariner. It'll give a nice contrast on the edge here, as well as fill in here where it didn't collect on the edge when I did the initial blending. So you have two ways of doing this. You can do like a kind of like a flicking motion, I think of it as. I'll do both so you can see what I mean. And it gives it more of a blended look on the edge. But it makes like an uneven, like I like how it looks kind of uneven. It almost gives it like an aged look. And then you can just come in and run it down the side. Either one will work depending on which effect you're looking for. But this method, you can see it's coming up. I'm already putting some good use to this brand new dauber. And if you don't want the splodges, I recommend blowing them off as opposed to rubbing them off, because they could leave streaks if you press them into the paper, because that little bitty bit is saturated with the ink. So I'm trying to give a lot of bang for your buck here in this video of things that I've learned along the way. So again, they don't look too dissimilar, but you can see it's a little bit wider edging here, and it's a little bit more contained to the edge when I did the sliding method as opposed to the flick. And then I also like to come in, it's really nice to use the small daubers to come in and darken the corners to add to that vintage feel. It's subtle, but it really does add a nice little pop to the project. And then again, I'll do this one with the flick. Get it in the corner. And then I'll use the slide method on this side again just to finish it off. Since I did it on that side, I might as well just do the sliding method here on the side. And I was a little bit too far over as opposed to that side, but no big deal. I'll just kind of blend it out. You can hold it, you can lay it down, it'll essentially function the whole way. The only reason why I trend toward holding it, if I can, is because then you can accidentally flip up the edge of the paper, where you have a little bit more control of not damaging the paper if you hold it. Sometimes I've had crinkles in the corner that I didn't want, so I had to stop and redo it when it's like a project for somebody or something I'm going to sell at the craft show, and I didn't intend for that corner to be flipped, and I had to go and redo it because I didn't lift it, I just did it like this, if that makes sense. If it doesn't matter, then the sky's the limit if you don't mind the little crinkle on the corner. So now you can see with that little bit of edging on the side, let me grab another piece here. Now you can see it gives that very subtle illusion of having layers to this paper. And what I'll do is I'll show you an even better example of how it can give that illusion by doing the edging on a straight white piece of the cardstock. So it can give you that dimensional look without really being dimensional. And I'll only do half and show you what I mean, so you can hopefully kind of see what it is I'm getting at here, of adding a subtle illusion of layers on your piece. Because you can do it with art journaling, you can do it with junk journal, you know, edging the pages, you can do it on the cards, you know, the sky's the limit. So now if you look at this paper, holding it in my hand, the side that has the color now looks more dimensional than the side without the color. This just looks like a flat standard piece of paper. No problem, it's nice paper, but this subtly adds that dimension to it, and it's just like that little extra something that you can add to your project. So I'm going to set that aside from our little demonstration. So I think one of the first things I'm going to do is one of the basic methods. One of the first things that I learned when I started exploring the Distress Oxide inks and the Distress inks and all of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend out really quickly. I'm going to go back to the dual blend, part in the Uncharted Mariner, part in the Peacock Feathers. It will be a little bit more because I don't, you know, they're both oxide, so I'm just going to sacrifice this guy. He's now going to become set for Uncharted Mariner, just so I can get through the demonstration a little bit faster. And I may put the section on speed up when I get back to this. So I'm going to do the quick blending, and then I'll show you the first technique I used really early on, very basic. Okay, so we got a nice even blending. And one other thing to point out, if you are using a piece of paper to kind of keep your fingers up and off of the ink so we don't do the fingerprint smudging, you just want to be careful around the edge, because if I'd have gone over accidentally the edge of this piece of paper, it would have put a line right through the middle, and if that starts happening, that can be difficult to blend out. So it's just something to be aware of. Just, you want to make sure you're blending ahead of the edge but not into the edge of the paper that you're using, or whatever, if you're using, you know, one of these in there, so you don't get the edge of that paper showing up in your project. So we're good to go. I'm happy with that blending, super quick. And the first technique that I saw was the water droplet method. And this one is super easy. It creates a really nice, easy effect, but it's another way to tap into the water-based aspects of the Distress inks. The oxides and the inks are both water reactive. And I believe unless you seal them, they are always water reactive. Even if they've dried, if you introduce a liquid medium or water or anything like that, they will always react. So when you're blending, you want to keep that in mind going forward, that these are always going to be water reactive. So, okay. So let me move that aside. And I did cover them so I didn't accidentally spray water into the ink pads. So you have two options. You can flat out spray, which, let me hold it up so you can see what I mean. I'm going to just full on spray with the mist part, or if you gently squeeze it and slowly squeeze it, you get the big water drops. I'm not sure how much that's showing up at the second, but I'll lift it up to the camera so you can see what I mean while they're still wet. Okay, so top half was the misty spray, the bottom half was the larger droplets. Larger droplets, misty spray. And they're both starting to do the ponding, and you can see, especially here, you can see where the water is reacting with the inks, and they're starting to turn into that watercolor effect. So you can let this sit for another little minute, or again, to save on time, let me grab some paper towel. And you can come in, lay down a piece of paper, you can lay down the paper towel. You could always use another piece of paper, which I probably should have done for a demonstration. I'll do that on the next one. So that way you can transfer some of the color onto another project, and then therefore you're not wasting that ink per se. So I come in, I dabbed up the extra water, and this is the effect that you're left with. So smaller misty, you get more of a faded look. In here, it's a lot smoother. There's only a few of the larger droplets kind of around the edge, but for the most part, it sort of looks exactly how it looked when it was wet, and it lifts off excess color to give a faded look. And then here you see, same principle, the water was put down, and because it was the larger droplets, you get the larger water effect on that. So that's one of the first things that I learned how to do with the Distress Oxides or the Distress inks. They will both do this, but again, I just happen to have the vast majority of my ink pads are oxide because I like that chalky finish that the oxides give. Whereas, I guess as an example, the inks are a more pure direct color, and these are more softer, more muted, for lack of a better analogy. So that is this one, and I'll set that aside to dry because again, everything that I'm doing here in these backgrounds I can use in a future project. So because we like to not waste the stuff. So yeah. Okay, so then the next one I learned, and I'm not going to bother about cleaning off the stencil since I'm working with the same colors. Let me lay down a new sheet of paper, and I don't mind. There's still some leftover water sprays on here. So just really quickly, I'm going to blend out just the top half. I don't need to recolor the whole paper or the piece of cardstock. So I'll just do a quick rough blending because this one is about the effect now. So if I get blotches in there, it's totally fine for what I'm doing right now. Especially given that this is another color lift, I guess would be the technical term, color lifting demonstration. So, okay, so I have my ink down, and this was the other technique that I learned second when I started using the oxide inks. And this one is probably one of my favorites when I saw it. I saw a gal working in an art journal, and she happened to be doing it for blending out the page, and I will be doing that in the next one, but that was just so cool to see that happen, the way the baby wipe color lift can work with the stencil. So, okay. Alright, so because I'm working with the circle stencil, I'm just going to use my fingertip, but you can use more of it depending on if you have a larger stencil or whatever it is that you're doing, or if you're just trying to lift color up. You know, you'll just play around with it if this is something that you want to try to see which way to use the baby wipe you like the best. So I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to hold down the stencil so I don't shift it, and you get like that double image. It's fine if it happens, but I don't want to do that right now. So you just take the baby wipe and you just run it over the circles in whichever way. You could go over the whole thing again, or you could just do a smaller section that I'm going to do here. And all the inks that were already on here are getting reactivated because they're interacting with the wetness of the baby wipe. So now I'll also have a little bit of watercolor effect going on. So I'll lift this up and show you. And you can see here how wet that was. It seeped down under the stencil and activated some of the colors that had been left on it. And then if you want, you could also come in and use the excess ink on the stencil to create another look. So here you get almost a circle image where it was ponding around the opening for the circle, as well as the color lift. It's more of a wavery, watery looking circle, but you can tell that they're circles. So that's the baby wipe method of color lifting on your project. Super quick, super easy, and again, like I said in the last video, you can get a package of baby wipes at the dollar store, and you can just unfold the whole thing, cut it in half, and then you've got double the volume of the baby wipes, because a small piece goes a long way. I just didn't want to take the time to cut it in half here today and add more time where I didn't need to. So that is the baby wipe method that you can use for color lifting and getting a different effect on there. The next one that I've done is something I saw, again, I think I had mentioned that, where the gal that was working in the art journal page, used the baby wipe to get a really nice blend of the color for her background, for her page. So since I've already done this here, I'll just use the same sheet to show you, give you an idea of what she did. So she had laid down her ink, and then she came back in on her page, and she just used the baby wipe to run it over the entire page, and now you see it gives you a completely different look. It's spreading a thin layer of the blue, or the peacock feathers I should say, across the entire page, and now the circles, the color got blended back in, but it looks more concentrated now where I did the color lift through the stencil. So now this looks more like that. But you can see here, hopefully it shows well in the camera, there's not a lot of color got spread down here where I didn't wipe as much, but you can see it's like a really pale robin's egg blue now down around the bottom, where this lifted the color and took it and put it all over the paper where it was touching the oxide ink. And again, this works for the distress inks too. Pretty much whatever water soluble you have, but because I'm in particular with the distress inks and the oxides, that's where I'm using the reference. And I believe that is what she was using at that point. She was using, I forget which color, but it was an oxide ink or oxide, or distress ink or distress oxide. So now it looks even different again from when I was working with the stencil. So that is the baby wipe method for color lifting or color blending. And again, these are cheap. It would have been perfectly fine to cut this in half to make this project or this demonstration work. So that was the next one that I had learned. And then the newer ones that I learned, I will do the ink smushing one first, because that one just sounds so much fun. The phraseology, you just gotta love it. It's like the colors of Tim Holtz inks and stuff. He comes up with some of the best names for his stuff. I love it. Alright. For the ink smushing, I'm going to do it first on using an acrylic black, as well as coming in with, if you have some leftover or random acetate from packaging or something you had in your stash. You don't need a whole huge piece unless that's the size of the project you're working on. As with everything, a little can go a very long way. And since I used the peacock feathers for the last one, I'll switch over to the Uncharted Mariner for this part. So, okay, so all you got to do is smush your pad down on the the block. And this is where you're going to want your sprayer. And you can take it easy. You can, again, just do a full spray, you know, just, again, protect your workspace. That's why I'm using this, to protect it as much as I can. And then you just activate the reaction with the water, and you can see it's already splatting. I haven't even gotten to the smushing part, and you can see it's already putting color out there. So you just add the water, you give it a little minute, then you can lift it, although it'll dribble. Just be aware of that. Most of the people that I've seen, if they're using like a block, they come in and lift the paper up, and then you just put it down. You can do a little rub, then you can lift it, and it really gives a nice watercolor effect, like at one time. And then I can come in and dab off the excess. Again, depending on how you want it to look. And then I can come in and dab some more areas and get some more color around my project. So it was a good choice to grab the watercolor paper. I really kind of didn't realize that when I grabbed it. It was just right there. So, happy accident. So that is the smushing on an acrylic block. So I'm just going to go ahead and wipe up the excess here, and then I'm going to remove the excess here, because then on the acetate, it's going to look the same, but again, just showing you how it works on using different ways to transfer the color or to smush the color. I'll just use a different color with the acetate. And I gotta, oh, here it is, okay. Yeah, be sure you can find it. Okay, so acrylic black, or any flat surface. It doesn't even have to be either of these. If you've got something flat, you got wax paper, you got something where the color won't absorb into it, you're golden. But these are what I have, so that's where I just went with it. I think they have media mats out there too if you wanted to go super duper fancy. I know Tim Holtz has one that comes with his black glass mat thing that he has. So, okay, so again, it's on the acetate, and you can see here, and I think for this one, since I do have something protecting my workspace, I'm going to pick up the acetate and lay it down on the paper, just so you can see a different way of applying it to your project, or your card, your paper, or whatever. Okay, so I'm going to kind of let it run around a little bit, and then I can be quick or it can dribble. It all is good. And then you can smush. Then you can rub it around if you want. And you can let it run around the excess, dribble back down. You can just have so much fun with this. And it's not, I'm not using a lot of ink. And then I can come in and dab it in different areas to get more color throughout the cardstock. And that's it. That is the super fun smushing, and I can already feel I need to do more of this. I have a bunch of cards I need to make, so I think I can do some more of the mixed media type and do some smush. So don't be afraid to do the smush. So I don't have time to let this dry, so I'm just going to wipe off the excess and set it aside. So that is the paint smushing technique. You can again do it on anything that is non-porous, that will keep the water from absorbing into it, and then you can put it right onto the paper, or you can put the paper onto the thing you're using to smush the ink. And then look at that really nice watercolor. People would look at that and think you sat down and did some watercoloring, if that's the effect that you want. And then, like in any of them, you could come back in with a stencil, which I think I'll do that. And you can do one of two things. I'm going to come in with the Uncharted Mariner with the stencil and add some color over it. and get some circles added onto our little watercolor panel, or our little watercolor looking panel. Okay, like that. Looks really nice. And it looks like different tones of blue too, which is really super nice. You can use one ink pad and it'll look like all different shades of blue, which is also very handy. You know, if you're working on something you don't have a lot of time, but you want to add a variety of shades, you can do it with one ink pad. Okay, so now, okay, well, if that's adding in the circles at the top, now I want to lift away some of this color to give the same effect, but in opposite, where I want to take away some of the color. And again, you can come back in with your baby wipe and do the color lift with that. And looks like I didn't press enough. Yeah, let me redo it. Why not? Get some more of a lift in there. So this takes a little bit of a minute to get it in there. Obviously, putting ink down will always be a little bit faster. Yeah, that's all right. It gets the job done. So you can see here's some of the circles popping up, but now I took away the color to add an additional effect to this one piece of paper. And people may think you spent hours on it, and everything that I did just now was just a matter of minutes, and it gives a really cool effect. And I can see where I was pressing too hard, it was starting to rub up the paper. So that is the paint smushing, or the ink smushing technique. There's that. And then the last one, it's basically using them as watercolor. You can do that too. Actually, I was going to do another stencil, but I'll just do straight off onto the cardstock. So for this one, I'm going to tape it down, since this is going to be kind of more like a watercolor effect. And I don't want the brushing to slide the paper around. At least hopefully I won't rub it too hard. So this one has already been used for blue. This should be dry because I think these were dye-based inks, so it just got stained. But you know what, if it adds a little extra blue in here, I'm not worried either, since that's the color I'm using. Okay, for the watercolor method, and again with his inks, a little goes a very long way. You just do one smudge of the one color, and I'm going to go ahead and come in and use both colors, and you do one little smudge of the other. Add your water, and again, I'm not worried here because I'm actually going to get the water wet as if you were using actual watercolor inks, to get that nice flow where the water starts blending and you get all those fun swirly patterns. I love that, where it just starts seeping into each other. So I'm going to do this one first, and you can see it's already spreading out among the water that I laid down on the cardstock. But you can absolutely use these as watercolors, because then, you know what, you don't have to have 8 sets of different kinds of paints. This will work as a watercolor just as easily if you went out and bought a separate set. So this could be cost effective on that aspect too, of once and done. And there you get the nice watercolor effect. So now at the top, I'm going to come in with the peacock feathers, and it gives a really nice blended watercolor look to it. The only part being, of course, you want to make sure you're using a paper that can handle all the liquid. And you can dab it. I mean, the sky's the limit again here of what you can do. And now here's another way to use your oxide inks and give the blended look, because this is really no less of blending than using the blending tools, which is why I included it. And, you know, come in with a little bit more here and a little bit more here, and then you get a little bit of that blending area where the colors kind of come together and integrate. And there you go. There's another panel that it's no less watercolor than if you're using actual quote unquote watercolor paints. And there you go. So that was, I believe, the final demonstration, was ending with the watercolor effect to blend out. And again, a tool maybe you didn't think of, you know, just because they're ink pads and you see everybody using the daubers or the blending tools or the brushes or what have you to blend it out, it doesn't mean that's all you have to use. So so hopefully I've been able to share some of what I've learned over the last few years that I've been using these, because when I started I had no idea. I blended really slow because I was afraid of getting the circles in there, and just, you know, when you feel like you don't know what you're doing. So now I am a lot more comfortable with it. I guess I could have done this. Yeah. I could have done a little smudging there too. I caught the little bits left. But in any case, so that is just a quick overview for part 2 of the different ways that you can blend with either the oxide inks or the regular distress inks from Tim Holtz. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully I wasn't too long-winded and stayed on track with what I wanted to share with you. And if this has given you some great information, I am so glad. So go forth and create and have fun with it and explore. And then just please remember, you do not have to break the bank to achieve the effects that you want to get as you learn and do your crafting. You know, none of these were overly expensive. You know, once it's done, I could probably be perfectly fine if I'd only kept these and these, which is primarily what I use. So, you know, I don't have to get anything else, and I'm perfectly happy. And the paintbrushes, again, those are cheap. You can get those anywhere if you want to try the watercolor blending effect. And it's perfect. So don't feel that you have to rush out and buy this latest gadget and that latest gadget to do what you want to do in using these inks and all the different ways that you can do it. Simple is sometimes the best, and that goes with your blending tools as well. So, okay, so on that, I will let you go. And again, thanks so much for watching. It really is so much fun hanging out with you guys. Take care, and I will see you in the next video.